Let's get right to our panel. Joining us here in Washington is Afshin Molavi. He's a senior fellow at the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. Gianno Caldwell is a Republican strategist and the founder of Caldwell Strategic Consulting. And Simon Marks is the president and chief correspondent for Feature Story News. Thanks to all of you for being here. Simon, what did you make of the speech?
Well, I think he's had a good 36 hours. It was the first time we've seen Donald Trump actually behave like a president of the United States. He was on message. He was relentlessly on the teleprompter. There were very few ad libs. And crucially, I think, in the hours after the speech, the White House managed to stay on message. They made a decision not to go ahead with the signing of the new executive order banning travel from various countries into the United States. I think that was a very important decision that they made because it allowed the White House to soak up the generally positive reviews of the speech that we've all been witnessing. However, 36 hours of relative restraint a presidency does not make. It's too early to say he's going to have another 36 hours of restraint. Who knows what happens before the end of the week? And I think that you were saying at the beginning, Anna, that, tonally this was very different. Yeah. You were suggesting that the substance was the same. I actually think in many areas of the speech, the substance itself was very different than some of the other things that he said. And particularly when you look at areas like immigration, when you look at trade policy, in many ways the speech, restrained and presidential though it was, raises far more questions than it answers.
Gianno, what we heard and saw on Tuesday night was a very different President Trump.
Absolutely.
We've heard these reports that he looked presidential, that he brought a lot of gravitas to the office, he was softer, he was less bombastic. What did you make of it?
Well, I would agree with that gravitas. And as someone who has been defending President Trump, or rather when he was candidate Trump, for almost 2 years on national television, the question continuously come up, when will he pivot? When will he be more presidential? And I'm happy to report that it has happened. The pivot has finally come. And I was really impressed by some of the things he said, and it reminded me of Reagan, one in which he likes to pattern his presidency by. In addition to that, it reminded me of President Obama, and I got a quote that really stuck with me. A new chapter of American greatness is now beginning. A new national pride is sweeping across our nation, and a new surge of optimism is placing impossible dreams firmly within our grasp. We are witnessing today a renewal of America's spirit. And I think that renewal comes with jobs, employment, speaking on issues that really count to us. A America First agenda, which a lot of people, especially me being a millennial, I'm the youngest one on this panel, during the George Bush era, many of us said, and to the point of some of the things that Ron Paul was saying, some of the things we'll be discussing in terms of giving resources to other countries, governing the world, things that we all looked at George Bush is doing, and me being an individual from Chicago, the south side of Chicago, if you're an African-American male between the age of 18 and 24, there's 47% of you unemployed. Where are the resources? Well, the resources are going to other countries. So now we have somebody who's focusing on us versus everyone else, and I think that's important.
Afshin, let's look at some of the specifics in that speech. Let's talk about trade. The president complained about the fact that other countries impose tariffs on U.S. goods. Let's take a listen to what he said.
Our trade deficit in goods with the world last year was nearly $800 billion. Currently, when we ship products out of America, many other countries make us pay very high tariffs and taxes. But when foreign companies ship their products into America, we charge them nothing or almost nothing. I believe strongly in free trade, but it also has to be fair trade. It's been a long time since we had fair trade.
So what is a country like China going to think about that?
Well, I think the way Donald Trump depicts free trade and world trade is he depicts the United States being constantly exploited and taken advantage of. But the reality is in the post-World War II international order, by the way, the post-World War II international order, many of those, the architecture was written by the United States, created by the United States. The United States has benefited a great deal from the globalization. When he talks about low tariffs, well, that's why you get $5 T-shirts at Walmart. It's because of the low tariffs, right? So there are countries countries around the world that are going to look at that part of the speech and say, wait a minute, because for, as I said, the post-World War II era, the United States has been a leader in promoting globalization, promoting free trade. And I thought an important part of the speech was when he said that, I'm not here to be president of the world. I'm paraphrasing. Right. I'm here to be president of the United States of America. But the fact of the matter is, over the past 60, 70 years, presidents of the United States have taken on the role of freedom of navigation, have taken on the role of global public goods. And when the United States does not lead, in my view, other actors will come in and lead, and it won't be necessarily good for the international order.
We're required, the way our government is set up, we will continue to lead, but the focus hasn't been on America first. And I think that's where a lot of people have problems, right? So what we've seen, and the reason why Donald Trump won, is because the considerations that have been put before us by previous presidencies, it's not just Obama, it's not just Bush. For a very, very long time, it hasn't seemed as though it was a system fair to us all, first and foremost. So what you said about the Walmart t-shirt, sure, but capitalism comes into play and there'll be competition. So either they want to do business or they don't.
But capitalism does come into play. If you are, as he appears to be doing, considering the imposition of an import tax on every avocado or every bottle of tequila that comes into the United States from Mexico, I like avocados, I quite like tequila. It's going to cost me 20% more to buy them. Right. That has a direct impact on the American consumer. There's also a contradiction in terms of what he's saying on foreign policy generally. He talked there in the clip that you played about NATO and deepening America's involvement with international alliances at a time when his own backers and advisors are suggesting he's moving away from the whole concept of the World Trade Organization. Now, the rules of trade are absolutely tightly bound to foreign policy and to deepening your involvement with countries around the world. I'm not sure it's that easy to break these things apart.
Simon, I want to get to something else. You talked earlier on about a change in substance in that speech. He toned down his hardline immigration rhetoric.
Yeah.
At one time talking about expelling millions of people. Take a listen to what he said.
Nations around the world, like Canada, Australia, and many others, have a merit-based immigration system. It's a basic principle that those seeking to enter a country ought to be able to support themselves financially. Yet in America, we do not enforce this rule, straining the very public resources that our poorer citizens rely upon. Switching away from this current system of lower-skilled immigration and instead adopting a merit-based system, we will have so many more benefits. It will save countless dollars, raise workers' wages, and help struggling families, including immigrant families, enter the middle class.
There is also talk now, Simon, about a path to some kind of permanent residence for undocumented people in this country. That's a pretty big change.
So that clip that you just played, that was a political depth charge inserted in the middle of this speech. And there were various fingerprints that you could identify of people that he's close to all over this speech. In that section, I think you could identify the fingerprints of Nigel Farage, the former leader of the UK Independence Party, who I'm sure has advised him that this idea of emulating an Australian-based, merit-based system can help America resolve its immigration woes. And it's an interesting idea. But imagine being General John Kelly, the Director of Homeland Security. You have just put out directives to your staff to start rounding up any illegal alien you encounter, not just the people that he defines as the bad dudes, any illegal alien you encounter, arrest them and begin deportation proceedings against potentially 11 million people. You then learn that over lunch with television news anchors hours before the speech, the president suddenly sounds interested in the possibility of giving some of those people the legal right to remain in the United States, an issue that he then doesn't reference in the speech, but he starts talking about moving to a merit-based system. It's impossible for anyone around this table or anyone watching that speech now to say Donald Trump's got an immigration policy.
What do you make of it?
I'm not familiar with this order in which you're referring to, because there's this thing called the rule of law in which you can't just round up someone because they're an illegal immigrant. They have to do something illegal in order for you to even know.
That's not what the directive put out by General Kelly
That
says.
would probably be illegal at this point and against every right in which we believe in our American system. So I'm not sure about that. The truth of the matter is there are things that are changing. He's been in office for 35 days. Every president, you see when you have a candidate Obama, there are changes that take place when you get familiar with the system, you learn of different things, that you didn't have access to as a candidate. And maybe there's some changing, a pivot that's taking place, which will benefit all people in America.
But the point, I'm making is that I think by doing it the way he did it yesterday, you sow more confusion about what the policy is. Be more honest to go up there and say, guys, I'm still figuring out my immigration policy, so let me talk about something else I've already figured out.
What he brought, I thought, was a very interesting concept, as you put it. For example, you cannot go into Canada and have a DUI. Did you all know that? They won't let you in. That's just a visit. That's not to stay or have a worker's permit or anything like that. We have to be just as serious as these other countries about allowing people into our country.
We already do have a merit-based system. I mean, there are gradations of certain levels of education. It's a lot easier to get into the United States. There
if
is
you
the
invest so much money,
there is an
H-1B
H-1B visa program in the United States as well. But I thought, to the larger point of the speech is that there's this old adage, where you stand depends on where you sit. And so 35 days in, it seems like the Oval Office maybe has given him the sense that these issues are more complex. So because we did see certainly more nuance, more complexity. We didn't see the campaign fireballs.
Right.
And so I think that some people said this was the speech that made him president of the United States.
That was Van Jones.
He was made president of the United States when he won the Electoral College.
Right.
But I get the point.
I want to get to that very thing that you're talking about, Simon. There were those few minutes in the speech which some people were calling transformative. That's the time when he became president. Let's take a listen to it.
We are blessed to be joined tonight by Corinne Owens, the widow of U.S. Navy Special Operator, Senior Chief William Ryan Owens. Ryan died as he lived, a warrior and a hero, battling against terrorism and securing our nation. I just spoke to our great General Mattis just now, who reconfirmed that, and I quote, Ryan was a part of a highly successful raid that generated large amounts of vital intelligence that will lead to many more victories in the future against our enemy. Ryan's legacy is etched into eternity. Thank you.
So the one way of looking at this is that was a transformative moment. That's the time when he showed what it's like to be a president. The other is that it was just cheap exploitation.
I thought it was a political masterstroke. He was under so much pressure over the way in which he had responded to the Yemeni raid. Even on television yesterday morning, in an interview, he appeared to be blaming the military. General Mattis suggested we should do this, and they lost Ryan, and there was no sense in which he was acting in the role of commander-in-chief. That moment last night, for the first time, was the President of the United States stepping up to the plate and saying, I'm Commander-in-Chief, and also demonstrating something that he genuinely hasn't demonstrated very much of so far, and that's empathy. There was empathy in that moment with Chief Owens' widow, and I thought it was very effective. There is reaction, particularly from some military veterans, people who say that it was cloying and he was taking advantage of her. I suspect that's not the way that it played in living rooms of people who have no direct contacts with the U.S. military.
I would wonder very clearly if people thought that about President Obama, because as you know, he's mentioned whether it be victims of violence or even military people who have been slain in his State of the Union address. I wonder if that same analysis would apply to him.
Okay, I just want to get what's your view on that? Very quickly, I've got 20 seconds.
Sure, no, I agree with Simon. It was a political masterstroke, and I thought it was, certainly one of the most powerful moments of the speech and one of the most powerful moments of this political season.
Okay, we're going to have to leave with that, gentlemen. Thanks to all of you for joining us.